Good morning, good morning. It's fun to stay up late. Good morning to you. And it is morning. I've got a cup of tea here. I'm trying to wake up. I've got about 40 minutes before I got to go to work, so I got enough time to crank my who win out for the day. And from Franklin Jarrett, we have the question of who wins in a fight: Zamasu versus, I believe his name is Asriel Dreemurr. If I'm being honest, this should have gone in the speed round. But every once in a while, I misinterpret something and think, this could be closer than it would be. And then I read the information. I'm like, this actually is pretty cut and dry. Obviously, we know Zamasu, the god who became a bigger god and hated mortals and wanted to kill all mortals. Your immortal plan. Zamasu, as a Kai, really wasn't all of that. I mean, he was certainly more battle hardy than most other Kais were. Like, he'd probably beat King Kai in a fight. He'd probably beat Shin. Like, most Kais are not that battle worn, battle savvy. Some of them got experience on the battlefield, no doubt about it. But most of them are peacekeepers. They don't get involved in mortal affairs and they don't fight usually. But Zamasu was a Kai in training, so he did actually train in martial arts, but he was surprised when Goku whooped his ass and I think he was just doing Super Saiyan 2 at the time, wasn't he? And so he enacted his plan. He made himself immortal, swapped his body with Goku's body, took it over, and then the two Zamasus met and carried out their plans. They fused together to become Fuse Zamasu, who was strong enough to go toe-to-toe with Super Saiyan Blue Vegito, who was, at that point, you're not dealing with multiversal level shenanigans at that point. In the manga, Super Saiyan Blue Vegito actually briefly surpassed Beerus in power. And they still couldn't put down Fuse Zamasu. Fuse Zamasu was so powerful that even though he wasn't technically immortal anymore because of the wish that was made, as they even said specifically for Goku, or specific for Zamasu, and he was no longer just Zamasu, he was something different. So the immortality was kind of affected. And I like how Vegito explains that. He's just so scarred. Yes, I took on the sins of this world. It's like, yeah, but you realize that bit you in the ass for your immortality, right? But more to the point, the reason I think this fight would even come into question at all was because we do have the feat of, even after being defeated by Trunks, he fused with the timeline as a whole, was starting to spread across other timelines. I think that's why this fight got chosen, because of the timeline feat. That said, that is a extreme outlier feat. That is like him technically has max potential after so many other things have happened. Whereas Asriel Dreemurr at his strongest let me put it this way, is in full control over his universe. Not necessarily the multiverse, but definitely his universe. But literally, he can make suns explode, pop plants out of bring suns crashing down onto a planet. He can just rewarp reality to the umpteenth degree. Basically, he is a walking infinity gauntlet. He has full control over the universe and over the timelines. He literally resets timelines when things aren't going his way. That's the level of, he doesn't actually really have any, they even speculate, he doesn't really have a weakness. Any sort of damage he took or any sort of weakness that was portrayed was something he allowed to happen. You can't even physically hit him in the conventional sense. Like someone who's got like spiritual abilities could hit him. Basically, you'd have to be a power that surpasses high universal in order to be able to actually do anything to him. Like, for example, Zeno would probably be an example of a character who would be a threat to Azure. I'll just say Dreemurr from here on out, because I don't know how to pronounce that first name. Zeno would be a straight out threat. Any of the gods of destruction would be a much higher threat, I think, to him than Zamasu would be. Because Zamasu's power really was limited to the main timeline, the main universe he was in. But there was the threat of it expanding. So and that's the thing. If we're talking about a Zamasu who would theoretically reach his potential, expand to every timeline, we might be having a different argument, because Dreemurr definitely is universal. There's no question about that, 1,000%. He might verge onto the multiversal plane, but I don't know if you could say he affects multiple universes when Undertale only has one universe. Uh, so, but the affecting of the timelines, like rewinding a timeline back is still something that's needs to be taken into consideration because at that point, Zamasu is literally a living timeline. So what happens if you try to rewind him back? Does he revert back to a physical body for Zamasu? Or does he just kind of age into a younger version of the timeline until he's aged out? Because the timeline itself has a point in it where Zamasu took it over. So do you just rewind it back to the beginning and their Zamasu is no longer a part of it? That's actually a really good question. Can you literally just rewind him out of the timeline itself, or like separate him from it? I'd have to say yes if you have the ability to really reset a timeline. So yeah, the only feasible version of Zamasu that even remotely would stand a chance would be the Zamasu who is able to merge with all timelines, not just the single timeline of that universe. And then you're talking about semantics a little bit. Is it still enough? Could he just still rewind him out? Is Dreemurr more than just universal? Is he multiversal? Because again, as far as I can tell, Undertale's only got one timeline, one universe, all that. So it's debatable. It is debatable. But look, for anyone who's like an Undertale fan, don't worry. I fully believe Dreemurr wins this fight 95% of the time, 99% of the time. There's maybe that 1 to 5% chance that that's something that maybe an outlier could happen. But it's not going to happen with Zamasu punching him. You can't really hurt him physically. He'd have to do some sort of spiritual-based attack in order to hurt him, or fight off the timeline, like Erasure. That's something we didn't really consider. The fact that he's now a sentient timeline. Could he fight off the reverting the timeline back to a previous state, the reset? Could he fight that off? We don't consider that. If the timeline itself is like a living entity, like time, for instance, like time in Sandman is a living entity. So if the timeline itself theoretically is a living entity, and you try to reset it, could it resist the reset? I didn't think about that actually. So I'm not saying he could, but I'm not saying he couldn't. I'm going to still lean on the side of Dreemurr, but I will say I think you have to give Zamasu a little bit of credit because he resisted death multiple times and was starting to literally take over the entire different realities. It took Zeno to just wipe him off the face of existence. So yeah, there'd only be a strict tier characters in Dragon Ball who would even be able to do anything against Dreemurr. And you're talking about Zeno. Zeno would be like the prime threat, because Zeno is straight multiversal. He can wipe out entire existences like that, and beyond. Like he's probably more like omni or outerversal than multiversal, because he literally can wipe a multiverse out just going squish, squish, squish. So that's someone who can literally just who's literally way beyond that. So Zeno, I think, is like one of the only straight threats to him. You'd have to assume those two guards that guard him are among the strongest in the universe too. So I'd have to assume they count. Angels probably count as a threat, and some of the gods of destruction probably count as a threat because they also get into multiversal. Again, couldn't find any statement where that said he was multiversal, but universal plus easy, yeah. And so that's a given. And he's not resetting multiple timelines in the sense that 5 timelines he reset them all at once. He's resetting the same timeline over and over and over again. That's what it is. Anywho, I digress. I definitely go Asriel Dreemurr. Let me know if you think differently. If you think there's an actual way for Zamasu to straight out win, let me know. All I've really been doing is giving them an avenue to resist him, not necessarily beat him. Because, again, physical attacks don't work on him in the general sense. Anyway, I digress. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time.